Our workforce today is struggling with perfectionism, and it can take many forms, ones that you don't even realize. I've struggled with it daily, actually, and it's something that we need to work on to keep our sanity. And at one of my lowest moments dealing with chasing perfectionism, I stumbled across a book that changed my life, and I have to share it with you. That book is Addicted to Perfect by Vitale Buford. You can get it hard copy here on Amazon. It's also on Audible if you prefer the audiobook. I've got both. Both are awesome. Believe me when I say you must read this book. And it is so well written. The struggles that she faces, it's brutally honest. And when I went through that hard time, I truly didn't feel like I was alone, because I was reading about this woman who was struggling so bad and so honest about it. The way she describes it just put me there right next to her. And when I was going through that tough time, this book straight up got me through it. Not even kidding. And the coolest part about it is Vitale is on HeroFront. She's the first non-veteran guest that I've had, but I think her message will really, really resonate with veterans, because being in the military is tough. It's hard. It has very high expectations. So the tools that she provides, the journey laid out in this book, I think would really, really benefit any military member reading this book. And without further ado, this is the hero's journey of Vitale Buford. Let's get after it. What was the craziest reaction from the book?
You know, it's interesting. I think, my friends read it, and I think everyone's reaction was, I didn't know it was that bad, or wow, I didn't know you were going through all of that, even though I told my story. But most people are just like taken aback by how real I tell my story and how raw it is, which is really the reason I wrote it. Was to tell the story about my addiction, and then perfectionism as a whole. But really, I wanted to be extremely vulnerable and tell my story in a really raw way, because as humans, we minimize our stories. We think that someone else had it worse than us, so I'm not going to tell my story, or my story hurts so bad that I just want to push it down. And so for me, the point was, like, we all have stories, and they're all important, and to own them is to also heal and release them.
I could drink at 18 because I was in Guam.
Right.
Stationed there. They changed the law since then. But I could drink at 18, which was not good.
Mm-hmm.
And I can barely remember my time in Guam because I was just blackout drunk, constantly. I didn't realize all the trauma from my childhood, the divorce, my family was ripped apart by divorce. Yeah. My mom's on her third husband. My dad's on his third wife. There's kids with all these people. My stepmom, unfortunately, passed away. So my half sisters were left like broken. I couldn't be there, because I'm in the military. I live in random parts of the world. And yeah, I didn't realize I was getting blackout drunk, because I would rather to feel that than to feel the pain of all these things happening in my life and just not knowing how to process it. And so those top 5 things on that video, the last thing that I mentioned is that I basically realized I was depressed and needed help. And I didn't even realize that until I stopped drinking.
Right.
And then I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, and I didn't even know depression was feeling empty and nothing. Like, I thought it was basically grieving is what I thought depression was. So when I felt nothing inside, which was odd because I'm a pretty emotional person, it was really just like, I wish I could cry. I wish I could feel those things. It felt like torture that I couldn't feel anything. And I didn't know that was depression for some people. So I share my story because I don't have anything to lose. I'm retired in 3.5 years from now from the Air Force. And I'm trying to share everything I've got at this point because I have nothing to lose. I've hit as high as the goal. I've hit every goal. So I don't think I ever told you how I found your book.
No, tell me.
The military is big on perfectionism. It's identified it now, and it's the awareness of how that can lead to problems is on the agenda in the military now, at least for the Air Force.
Yeah.
It's been identified as a problem area.
Yeah.
Perfectionism, because like when I came up in the military, I was expected to be perfect. And if there was anything wrong with you, you would hide that. You would learn to hide that. And that could lead to some serious problems
Right.
for a lot of people. I was struggling with perfectionism because I came off that win in 2019, and I've kind of been an underdog growing up. I've kind of struggled to get a positive limelight. I was broken and I needed a lot of work. And so by the time it finally clicked for me, I hadn't really had much success, if that makes sense.
Right.
So when I got it, it was like life-changing for me. Life-changing. I wanted more of that. And I had a moment of weakness with that, with the pursuit of that. I felt like I had the template. I know it works. I'm friends with the people who decide the winners now. I've met them. I'm known throughout the Air Force. I'm going to do this again, which is missing the whole point of the program.
Right.
But it led me down a path of trying to be perfect. And at the end of all that, I didn't win. And it freaking crushed me. It crushed me. And I missed the whole point. You know, when I actually won, I probably wasn't the best. You know, in hindsight, they're looking for the underdog who's doing more with less. They're not truly looking for the obvious winner sometimes.
Right.
They're looking for the most deserving at that time. And yeah, I missed the whole point entirely. And I was crushed. Then COVID happened. That made me want to go off the deep end. I was losing my mind. Like I didn't realize, because I was on lockdown too, the whole base was, and I didn't realize just how like bad off I was until I was put in that situation. And I was like, this is not good for me. Like to lose that award I worked a year for, now I'm isolated, trying to take care of my wife and these two young kids. You know, the hard time I was going through, this helped me so much to get through that time. It really, truly did.
Really honors me for you to say that. I'm like, I'm going to get emotional.
We haven't even started yet.
I know.
But yeah, I felt like I wasn't alone. I felt like you were right there with me, and it got me through it. It got me through that hard time. It really did. Because what I thought was a hard time didn't even hold a flame to your hard time. My God, you have got to be.
Everyone has hard times. That's
right.
the thing. Like it's not someone has it worse or harder. It's just that's your experience. It's mine. And I went through that experience so that I can teach what I teach, right? And then I can change lives the way that I can change lives. So I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, and you are one of the most resilient people ever. Because I don't know how you got out of that. Like I think that's what kept me listening. Like I couldn't see you getting out of that. I couldn't see how that could turn into a happy ending. How? You know, and I think that's what really drew me in. I needed to know how.
Yeah.
I needed to know how you did it. All right, let's do it. Let's hear the story, the hero's journey of Vitale Buford.
The hero's journey. So obviously I didn't know that perfectionism was a problem growing up. And as I wrote my story and I look back, I know that was the main issue, and everything else I struggled with was just a symptom of my addiction to perfectionism. And it really all started in childhood, which is most of our unhealthy coping mechanisms were born in childhood or young adulthood. And so for me, I was born in a household with two workaholic parents with an alcoholic mother. And the time whenever I got love and attention was when I was perfect, right? I always got praise for being self-motivated and not really needing any time or attention and doing my own thing. And so I continued to follow that path, right? To be self-sufficient, to make perfect grades, to be perfectly thin, all of those things that I thought I needed to be loved. And that's just what I thought I needed to survive, right? Like Vitale's making good grades and all the praise and accolades. So when I was in college, it was hard, right? I went to the University of Georgia and it was difficult. And I really over-identified with my body and my body image and my weight. And so in college, when I gained weight, it was a struggle for me. And I was introduced to Adderall when I was a junior in college. And I took it, and it literally was the perfect drug, right? I could lose weight without any effort. I made perfect grades, which I was already, I mean, I worked hard and made good grades, but I was able to make extremely good grades while working 2 part-time jobs with, again, little effort. And I was hooked because it allowed me to be perfect. And I mean, perfect's unattainable, but it allowed me to be what I thought was perfect. And that started a 10-year love affair with this drug. And no one knew that I was struggling with this addiction because it's a very private addiction, or at least it was for me, and a very silent addiction. And so when I had a very, an extremely successful career in corporate America. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was successful by all external measures. And people would always say, you look perfect and you have the perfect career, and how do you do it? And how do you work that hard? And all those things. And I'm like, oh, it must just be natural. And again, getting all the praise, right? Like a job promotion, a raise, extra responsibility, all of those things, right? I was a workaholic, a people pleaser, always cared what everyone else thought, and constantly seeking the advice of others. Well, what do you need me to be for me to be happy? And so at the end of the 10 years, I was doctor shopping because my tolerance had gotten so high, and the doctors were finding out about each other. And so my supply was running out. I was 31 years old, and then this pivotal moment in my life happened, right? I've been struggling with Adderall, running out of it, doctor shopping. I mean, it was a really intense 10 years. And I, again, on the outside was very successful, but was really struggling on the inside. And so at the end of my 10-year addiction, some of the most powerful words were said to me that changed my life, right? So I'd hired this coach to come speak to the attorneys. I was a marketing director at a law firm at that time. And I had hired these attorneys, or hired this coach to come speak to my attorneys about executive presence. And he was also a friend of mine. And he'd seen me interact with my team, and he looks over at me out of nowhere and he's like, Vitale, are you critical of your team? And being someone who did not like judgment, did not like criticism, right? Feedback was not something as a perfectionist, feedback was not something I was open to because I took it very, very personally. And I looked at him and he was like, he could tell I was upset. And he was like, no, I think you're critical of your team because you're critical of yourself. And I was like, okay. And again, little self-awareness at this time, right? And then he drops this, quote on me that was the game changer for me in terms of getting sober and turning my life around. He told me the quote, I see in you what I refuse to see in me. And I had no idea what that meant. I see in you what I refuse to see in me. I'm like, I don't know what information he's getting me. This has been really intense. And a week later, it all unfolded. My mom had come to visit me. I got home from work. She had been drinking. I got so upset with her, just pointing my finger at her. Why can't you get sober? Why can't you change? And at that exact moment, I remembered that phrase, right? I see in you what I refuse to see in me. And I realized that I was pointing the finger at my mom to get sober, yet I was refusing to get sober. And that was
powerful.
The most pivotal moment of my life, because I changed everything. I admitted to her that I had an addiction. I had not admitted it to anyone. I mean, there were, obviously, if you read my story, like some people found out, but I had never admitted that I had a real addiction. And it was just this really beautiful moment, even with my mother, right? That she created a space for me where I could be vulnerable and say, I have an addiction. And literally got on my knees and prayed for help, which I had never prayed for help before. I had prayed for more Adderall, but I had never prayed for help before. And I went to rehab, and I've been sober for almost 7 years. And lots of other things have happened, but
lots of other things.
Lots of other things have happened, but that's the summary.
Right.
My story of getting sober.
You're really bringing me back to the book. Like what struck me while you were telling me your story, and I was thinking of all the situations that you were in. But you were willing to die for perfectionism.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, that's that's really what it is. Like, I remember reading that thinking, I can't believe, like, at what point is it still worth chasing? At
Right.
what point is it enough? I think that's the scary part, is that there's no ceiling, there's no cap to it.
Right.
The outcome is sometimes death. You will chase it till it kills you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, just it takes a physical toll on you, a mental toll on you. I mean, again, in my book, I mean, I developed an eating disorder when I got sober. So, yes, the Adderall was gone, but then I got down to 103 pounds because I had not healed my deepest wounds. And I was angry because I was like, why do I have now I have another addiction, right? Like I had the Adderall, but now this eating disorder is just as consuming. I mean, truly, it took up just as much time. It was the same obsession. And that was an aha moment. But it was really in the writing of my book that I realized, oh, like all of the pieces clicked. I'm like, oh, it's perfectionism, my people pleasing, my workaholism, my over identification with my body, my constant comparison, the not trusting in myself, not even knowing what my intuition is telling me.
Wow. So you didn't know it was, you didn't simplify it to chasing perfectionism until,
And so I read the book.
wow, holy cow. So once that clicked for you and you realized this is the core of my problems, like, what do you do with that information?
Well, when I realized it, I was like, well, I am not alone. And no one is talking about this. No one is talking about perfection. Like people touch on perfectionism, but no one's talking about it as this main pillar and this main obstacle, this thing that we chase. I mean, 97% of people struggle with some form of perfectionism. Obviously, some are on a like more strict perfectionist than others, but 97% of people. And so I was like, no one's talking about this. This is my life's work, is to turn all perfectionists into recovering perfectionists. And so I started creating content based on my experience and how I started healing it in myself.
So how does one who is, maybe not specifically Adderall, but I mean, perfectionism can come in so many forms, right?
Right. Right.
Like, where does one begin who realizes their problem is chasing perfectionism? How do you even start that process of getting out of that habit?
Yeah. So I think it's first understanding of what perfection is, right? So perfection is this false identity that we think we need to be worthy. It's when we outsource our self-worth and our decision making and our intuition to other people, right? It's when we allow everyone around us to be the expert of us instead of us being the expert of us. And so that shows up. There's lots of symptoms of perfectionism that, again, people typically associate perfectionism with, oh, needing to have a perfectly clean house or a perfectly organized desk. And that is not perfection. Perfectionism symptoms are procrastination, right? When you need to have all the perfect information before making a decision, or you don't start a project because you're so afraid it won't be perfect enough, right? I'm not capable of doing this. So you put it off and you put it off. It's when you have unrealistic expectations of yourself and then also unrealistic expectations of others. It's when you avoid difficult conversations, right? Because we don't want to have that difficult conversation because what if someone rejects us? Or, we can't control that other person. It's that need for control at all times. It's when we're constantly people pleasing, right? I need you to be happy for me to be happy. That advice seeking, what should I do? I don't know myself. Like, what decision? You make the decision for me, right? We don't take responsibility for ourselves. It's obsessive thoughts, right? Because perfection gets us out of our hearts and into our heads, right? We are our thoughts and then we beat ourselves up. We're super critical. It's when we're constantly comparing ourselves, we get stuck in indecision, and it leads to low self-worth, feeling stuck, overwhelmed, chronic stress. And so that in a nutshell is how perfectionism manifests.
Yeah, when we hear perfectionism, I'm not thinking about all those things.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that is a problem. Everything you were saying, I was thinking like, yep, I did that this week. Yep,
Right.
I did that.
Right. So it's something that no one's really talking about. And so when I realized like this is what perfectionism is, and this is the problem, more people need to know about it, because when you have that framework for what it is and how it's holding you back, I mean, massive change can happen and transformation in your life.
So how has it transformed your life? So like, once this moment clicked for you, you've identified what the problem is. The problem at its core is all your value, all your self-worth, all of it, you're essentially handing over to the environment and to the people in your environment,
Right.
right? I mean, that's what it sounds like. And that really does, resonate with me when I think about it. Once you identified that, how the heck do you change doing that? Like what
Yeah.
worked for Vitale?
Yeah. So first it's becoming aware of it, right? Like, again, I know people are like, especially as perfectionists, we want to fix everything now, right? They're probably, if you're listening to this, you're probably listening to those symptoms and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I want to fix it all now. But we first need to become aware. So when I'm working with people, it's all about just being a curious observer, because as perfectionists, we're not curious because we want to know everything. And so we need to be curious about our thoughts, like, oh, that's why I'm beating myself up, or that's why I'm procrastinating, or that's why I'm avoiding this difficult conversation. But it's about writing, like literally when I'm working with clients and organizations, I have people spend the first week writing down all of their limiting beliefs, everything negative they say about themselves, just so we can get a really good picture of the pervasiveness of it, right? Like, what are the thoughts that you're telling yourself and how are they holding you back? And so that's how you start. And I teach a lot of, obviously, content around this and then how you heal it. But awareness is that first step.
Okay. So journaling and self-reflecting, meditating, thinking about your day, the times that you were uncomfortable, the times that you were stressed, and what kind of self-talk. Do you think self-talk is a big part of this? Was that an issue for you?
Almost definitely. I mean, I would say that's my biggest issue, right? I mean, even, while this is what I teach, I mean, I still need it, right? Like, perfectionism still comes up for me. You teach what you need most. And so
Right.
it's not like I'm cured. We're humans and we evolve, and different layers of my perfectionism will come out. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just another thing that I can teach and I can heal. I work with people one-on-one that are struggling with perfectionism, and then I teach it in organizations, because most organizations have a culture of perfectionism, right? It's fear-based. People don't feel like they can speak up. They don't ask for help, right? The pressure to perform. And so it's about transforming organizations that have cultures of perfectionism to cultures of excellence. And that's the thing too, is as perfectionists, we're like, well, why do I want to give perfection up? I've been successful. Right? It's like, oh, I mean, I achieved this certain amount of success with what I'm doing. Why would I change what I'm doing? I mean, I'm getting rewarded, right? We get rewarded. It's not that it doesn't work, but here's the thing. You want to go from perfection to excellence, because you can have all of the success, the same success and more, but without all of the stress, all the anxiety, all of the questioning of yourself, the indecision, the procrastination, right? Because perfection is externally motivated.
What are some things that you do like day to day to help keep your own self in check? Because like you said, you're still human. It's not like the trauma of your life just never happened. It's still there, right? You still got to keep it at bay for the rest of your life. How do you keep it at bay, like daily? What are some practices that you've used daily that work?
So for me, like, my morning routine is non-negotiable. And also it's about following through on promises that you make to yourself, right? Because the more you follow through on the promises you make to yourself, the more confidence you have, because perfectionism is a confidence killer, because we beat ourselves up, we question ourselves, and we let others determine our worth. And so it's up to us to really follow through on those promises, like waking up when my alarm clock goes off. And so my morning routine is honestly the key to my success. It is the foundation for everything, which is I wake up at 4:30 a.m. I work out, I gratitude journal, I do meditation in the middle of the day. But that gratitude journaling and the exercise and just the reflection, like, that is critical to maintaining my mindset. And then also just making the decision to choose better thoughts, right? When we're perfectionists, we play the victim. We're actually a passenger. We're not in the driver's seat of our life. We're in the passenger seat of our life. Because again, we're letting everything else determine our trajectory.
Wow, when you say it like that, it sounds really scary. I mean, because you can't control who's going to come at you with what problem and what, you know what I mean? And what kind of energy level. And to think that you're just basically a victim to your own environment. Like when you really think about it that way, that's terrifying, because we've all been there.
Right. And I don't like the word victim, right? Like when I had to look and like admit, like, oh my gosh, I've been, and it was a coping mechanism, right? But I've been playing the victim. I was like, goodness, like I need to change this. But that's what that's the transition, right? Is going from being the victim and the passenger of your life to the driver, the leader, the CEO of your life.
Try to be like that person you envision up here. Like we all have like this expectation, and I'm not talking about being perfect. I mean like doing the things that make the best version of you, whatever
Right.
that looks like. Like, is that working out 5 days a week? Did that make you feel a better version of you? Or was it 2 days a week? Was going to bed on time? Did that help? Like we all kind of start to know as we get older what those things are, but we don't always do those things. It's hard to do those things, right? Because it's basically a commitment to diving right in on that day. And sometimes we struggle with that. I do, if we know a particularly hard day's coming up and we wake up and we're looking at our phone, it's much easier to just say, you know what? I'm going to look at this phone for 10 more minutes. Okay. Now I'm going to look at it for 10 more minutes. And then pretty soon you're rushing to get out the door because you've just been avoiding, starting your day. And that's the worst way you could start your day, if I'm being
Right.
honest.
Right. When you heal your perfectionism, you know that you deserve more. It's like, okay, I am the driver and the CEO and the leader of my life, and I'm going to show up for myself because my dreams and my goals and my relationships and how I treat myself are worth it.
Definitely. So some parts of your book that really jumped out at me, there was a lot. But just while we were talking about your book earlier, one part that really jumped out at me that I wanted to just get your thoughts on was when you were willing to drive to your friend's house.
Oh, in Knoxville?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought that was a perfect story as to how desperate you were clinging on to that.
Oh, yeah.
Could you run me
And
through that story?
yeah, I mean, I had run out of Adderall um and I knew that my friend, and I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, so Knoxville is like 2.5 hours away. And my other prescriptions aren't going to be able to be filled for like another 2 weeks. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get by. Right. Like I mean, my identity was wrapped up in Adderall and what I thought it made me be. Right. And the level of, and my worthiness, right. Like I need it to be worthy. And so I knew that my friends in Knoxville had it, but they had it like legitimately. They were not abusing it like I was. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to, literally, it was insanity. I was insanity. I was like, I'm going to tell them I'm going to a conference so they don't think I'm crazy. Like, oh, I'm going to drive. Cause I'm like, I thought of all angles. It was it was manipulative, right? But it was manipulation because it was survival, right? So it wasn't like malicious manipulation. It was just, I needed to manipulate so that I could get more Adderall and then feel okay about myself. And so I remember calling them and being like, hey, I'm going to be at this conference. I didn't even know if they were, I didn't tell them I was coming there for Adderall because I knew that they wouldn't give it to me. And so I was like, I'm just going to play this off, right? Like I'm at a conference.
And how far of a drive is this?
2.5 hours. So it was a 5-hour drive in an evening. So I drive down there, have dinner with them. And then I'm like waiting for the perfect time to bring it up, like hit it at the right time. When can I tell them I need Adderall? And, do they have any leftover that I can buy? And so I did, and I got some, but again, it was like for like maybe 15 pills. It was insanity. And and then I drove back, but yeah, that story and many like those just shows like how desperate I was and how much that was the driver of my life.
Do you think that was more rooted in a physical addiction, or do you think that was more rooted in the perfectionism?
It was perfectionism. Like the physical addiction, like, yes, like when I would have times where I would run out, I was depressed, I was hungry, I was tired. But it was the mental association for me. It was the, like, there were probably some physical addiction symptoms, but honestly, that wasn't strong. For me, it was the depression. It was the association with my worth that I couldn't be anything without it.
But it was literally a part of your identity, your success. Right. And without it, you're nothing.
Yeah. And no one knew.
How painful was it holding on to that, by yourself? I mean, that had to have been so isolating.
It was, which is why when I got sober and started telling people, I was like, I'm going to write a book. Like people are not talking about this. People aren't talking about Adderall. And again, you can struggle with perfectionism and have nothing to do with Adderall. That's not the point. That was just one of my many symptoms of perfectionism. But it was, the bigger problem was this perfectionism.
Have you been able to help anyone that's read this?
I have, yeah. So lots of people who have struggled with Adderall addiction have reached out to me. And so that's been wonderful, but I'm always honored just when anyone reads my book, it's always like, I just feel really honored. It just really touches my heart because it's a very real account of my life.
Has anyone told you what I told you about how it kind of helps me raise my daughter?
No.
So, it all starts with your relationship with your parents, that perfectionism seed was planted in your head.
Right.
How it basically became part of your survival at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, having a young daughter who's 3.5, like, it just made me want to just hug her tight and just tell her she's beautiful. And it really opened my eyes to raising my own children, that part of your book.
Yeah.
Do you ever talk to parents about this stuff?
I do, but for me, like, I don't blame my parents. They were doing the best they knew how to do. And so when anyone asks me, I mean, I don't know. I mean, as parents, we're all doing the best we know how to do. But for me, like, you heal yourself, you heal your children, period. You heal yourself, you heal your children. So the more you're aware of your own perfectionism tendencies and you heal them, they will then not overflow into our children because we're constantly just projecting onto our children our hurt and we're spilling over onto them. And so the less we spill over, the less therapy they'll need later on in life.
And isn't it crazy how like trauma's passed down generations?
Oh yeah.
Have you noticed that?
It's 100%. Like my parents are just passing on what they learned. And so and that was a big piece of me, like, learning to forgive and choosing to forgive and find acceptance for my parents because they really were doing the best they knew how to do. But here's the thing, now that we know better, right? I know better, I can do better. And so I continue to work on my own healing because again, when I heal myself, I don't spill over my stuff onto him.
And we focus on mental, spiritual, social, and physical. So like we have it broken down into those basics. Hey, if you have these basics down, you will have a full cup and then you can pour into others.
No, I think it's great. That's awesome that's something that they're promoting. I love it.
Yeah. Our new Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force is very, very open, very vulnerable. She's the first female command chief of any service in history.
That's amazing.
So history is being made. And I happened to have dinner with her by complete chance before she was selected for that. I went to an award ceremony.
Yeah.
I got to sit right next to her. And so now I know her. I know this person, which is just so cool. And she preaches a lot of the stuff that like you touch on and that you believe in too. So I think we're just headed in such a great direction right now with identifying how like we can't expect to be perfect. That's not a realistic path. That's not a realistic goal. And it's always going to end in letting yourself down eventually. It might work short term, but it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right. And
so to finish that marathon without quitting, we cannot have perfectionism running our life.
Right.
So I know you're not in the military.
I'm not. My grandfather.
Although you would have been a great officer, I feel like you would be. I don't know why. I have a knack for recognizing talent. So I think you would have been a great mental health officer.
Awesome.
So if there's tons of airmen out there struggling with perfectionism. One, because that's kind of it's hard to separate perfectionism and expectations of the military. It's hard to separate that. And if you've had a boss who was treated poorly and now he's in a position of power, that's all he knows, or he or she knows. So what would you tell that person that perfectionism's kind of starting to rule their life? They're naive. It's ruling their life. They're stressed out. They're letting themselves down. They're missing suspenses. They're beating themselves up. What would you tell that person?
Yeah. I mean, I would tell them that there's another way, right? There's a much better way to live. And when you release the perfectionism, I mean, you have a life that's fulfilled and present and connected, and you achieve more than you could have ever dreamed of without perfection. Like, we think that perfection is the way, but it's actually the obstacle. I'm really grateful that you had me on your show, and I'm honored that the story resonated with you. And I just hope this helps people. I mean, just know that you're not alone. Again, perfectionism is something that 97% of people struggle with. But again, as perfectionists, we don't talk about it. So we feel so isolated and alone. And so anyone is welcome to reach out to me if this resonates with them and they're not alone. But also, all you have to do is become aware and then start choosing better thoughts, words, and actions.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much, Vitale.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, she hit on about 1/50th of what's in this book. This book is absolutely packed to the max with lesson after lesson after lesson. It's one of my favorite books of all time, hands down. I will be rereading this book. I will be preaching this book to everybody. It helped get me through a hard time. So I want to thank you, Vitale. I'm a little selfish because I asked you to be on here because I just had to talk. I had to meet you. I had to, after reading this book. And the fact that I'm talking to you right now, after reading this book and knowing who you are, I'm blessed. I am blessed. I'm blessed to have you in my life and to have this book. And I'm going to share it with others, and hopefully other people can be as impacted as I was from it. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being open, for being vulnerable, for sharing your journey, so that other people struggling have that source of light to get them through, to show them how it's done. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. So thank you, Josh.